No. This, and you got.
Upgraded.
Yeah, microphone's right there, dude.
Probably.
The cheeseburger.
It's got like 40.
How can we remote?
Sign in back there.
Like, we'll have your server.
Like 6 or 6:30.
Couple of cheeseburgers save me.
There you go.
Hey, thanks for the help, man. I appreciate it.
You know, it is a schematic.
It's in that TNN.
Lefty.
I feel
Thank you, thank you.
awesome.
That's not my first test.
Yeah, but I heard this.
I'll tell you what, it was really hard.
You can't get on the Wi-Fi if
So dark.
I was thinking sometimes around mid-April.
update that takes.
Oh.
I would.
Mason.
Okay, no, good.
There are many.
That's right.
These tires.
Where you can start
You
coming.
don't need to change tires.
You
You need to change tires, I ain't racing.
Yeah.
racing gear. You're racing gear. You gotta off the bead.
Oh.
You gotta break a few seals here and there.
I got a.
It's like, I've got the multi-focal going.
I've done that a lot. I broke the speed. You're riding good.
I guess.
You're riding hard.
I don't know, we need some.
Yeah.
So the work they're doing on the food truck over here. Still the work.
That's Saturday.
And the harps. Take a peek at them, man. All kinds of stuff. They're working hard.
Ride like a section of trailer. And then you got like.
I'm on
Trans.
The other day.
Transfer. Didn't transfer.
Well, do you have to have surgery or something? See, I know you. Is this your old, right?
Your time stops, so you just pick it up.
The rain going to come up.
You're like really. Transfer and then you get to the next spot. And you come to the break.
Yeah, finally, man.
You're like me, you're like.
Those contractors.
You're always trying to.
You're just like, oh, keep going. Oh, great.
She is there.
Say yes and then. Nasty, I guess.
Oh, you're losing it. Losing it.
My question is, like, I'm super happy to have you.
Read it, didn't see it, so.
All right, let's go ahead and get started this evening. City of Centerton Planning Commission. City of Centerton Planning Commission, March 15th, 2022 with a roll call.
Tony Davis. Gary Harris. Amber Beal. Billy Engel. Ben Lewis. John Sessoms. Devin Murphy. Craig Langford is absent. And Jeff Seifard.
Here. First thing on the agenda this evening is the approval of the minutes. The ones this evening are the special planning meeting that we had last week. I just had one noted change that we adjourned the meeting at 5:10, not 6:10. So just that was the only note that I had. If there were no other comments or changes, I would entertain a motion to approve the planning minutes from 3/8.
John, I'm motion of the meetings from change.
Motion and a second. Is anyone opposed? All right, next on the agenda this evening is the ratification of the admin approvals. I looked through them. I didn't have any questions. Are there any questions or comments from any of the commissioners? If there are not, then I would entertain a motion to approve the admin, to approve the ratification for the admin approval.
This Tony, I approve the ratification of the administrative approvals.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is anyone opposed? All right, next on the agenda this evening is new business. First thing under new business was withdrawn, which was a rezone 2203. Second thing on the agenda is the development 2114. The Casa Castilla large scale development at 148 Seba. As a reminder, it's 19.5 acres and it's zoned C3. To give us an overview.
If you have any engineering questions or site questions, I'm here with the engineering survey.
Yeah.
In person.
I'm Jeff. Yeah, I've talked to you a bajillion times.
Yeah. The overview is pretty simple. It's,
Give us your name, please.
Madison Purvis, the architect for this. Overview is pretty simple and it's a lot on an approved PUD. We're looking to do a daycare facility. In addition to that, the couple of adjacent roads and necessary structures, including parking to service that first phase.
Donna, you want to give us a staff overview?
So this is phase one of the PUD that you all looked at previously. It is for a 13,500 square foot daycare in the northwest portion of the property, as well as the schools, utilities, and other infrastructure that is needed for the property. We have received a concurrent driveway and easement dedication we are currently reviewing. With that, there were trails which were discussed as part of the PUD. Staff has looked at having those installed with the buildings that are close to the road in order to avoid potentially those being damaged with later construction. We have received a traffic study by Peters and Associates looking at the impact of the on the road, looking at the capacity and the levels of service. So levels of service are rated on an ABC scale. Anything lower than E would be unstable flow. E is approaching unstable flow. Everything in the scale, which in your report was D or better, except for 2, which is the eastbound through a turn lane on Siva at Main Street. During the evening rush hour. And southbound. Also. The general conclusion of the report was that the existing roads can support the anticipated 5-year traffic from both the surroundings and from this development. There are some open space requirements from PUD. There will be some requirements from this, which would be dealt with through dedication plat. There has been landscaping provided with this, with some trees along the western part, as well as some trees with parking areas. The parking was something that we looked at pretty extensively with the PUD because of the shared. What it typically looks at is 1 square feet for daycare, and this more than meets that. So there are 40, that would require 45 stalls there. So there's this plan exceeds. So we did receive a plan for approval. There is one entry sign provided at Isabel. What we need planning commission approval for the landscaping plan and the light. There are a couple of outstanding comments, including a minor adjustment to the adjacent street agreement, but generally everything is very minor, and we recommend approval. And get the adjustments with the right of way and easements taken care of on that plat.
Any questions or comments from any of the commissioners?
So we saw the overall PUD last time. Are there any changes to the site plan specifically for this one that would impact the PUD? Does it line up pretty well?
In general, it lines up pretty well. There were some minor adjustments with like how the landscaping and the trees function a little bit more. But overall, it lines up pretty well with what you all saw with.
Any changes to the Isabella Drive? And I know there was some talk last time about going traffic going in and out of the neighborhood, doing something to kind of slow that or
I think we did the median, right?
It is still aligning with the existing spur.
yeah, I see it. I see it.
This is, north is currently right on this plan, yes.
That's great. If I turn it, my computer will completely freeze.
As I recall from the last meeting, we talked about traffic calming and a general consensus. I think it was with was that speed bump situation we were talking about was not desirable, and that what we did with the trees, the landscaping, and the median was a pretty sufficient traffic calming strategy.
I didn't see the bottleneck there. That kind of helps a lot too.
Jeff, I have a question on the development plan. On the comments they were talking, they listed on item 7, the details show a 3-inch asphalt section, a 4-inch asphalt section. Does the section for Isabella, does that meet? I'm not seeing, I missed it. I'm not seeing the street.
Should be some details,
It's okay with the detail of the street.
details with the street sections on there. I think what you're looking at is just for the parking lot. It could actually be some cross section. It may not have made it into our package yet.
Is
We didn't get that.
staff okay with the level E? I don't, it references Rose Street, but I assume it's the Crane Way. Traffic study references Rose. Cedar Road and Rose Street. But Crane Way is, so I imagine. Did that road name change?
The South Street should have changed to Grace.
Grace? That's not referenced in the traffic study. It says Rose Street.
Rose would have been the previous name.
That was approved. Any concerns with the level of service E?
Synopsis. There's a really great summary at the end of the traffic study.
Moment.
Oh, it occurs on site. Yes.
I thought that the way that they summarized it was terms enough for us to kind of understand the impact in a better way than looking.
My question in a broader sense is, what is the typical kickover point for road improvement? Rated on a level of service.
Right, and I think anything you would think they would rate it higher, but I think anything D or E is acceptable. By all means, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, because I'm trying to remember from my transportation planning days. Level of service D is considered acceptable, like looking at federal highways and things like that. I think that's kind of odd, but that's what they do consider acceptable as a level of service D. E, I think they look at it as far as how long of a period of time is that level E going to be there. If it's going to be, 4 hours a day, Okay, that's not gonna be acceptable. But the only thing that is really considered flat out unacceptable is level of service F. So. If that helps at all, again, I'm trying to remember back to,
I don't think we have any that I can remember, at least that I've seen, any traffic studies that have come in and really dictated like on-street road improvements.
Wanted the new school to do it though.
They did, but they came in with a already ready to roll. I don't know what their level of service. is.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but I
Yeah.
know that was probably one of the last traffic.
Featherston, they did one, and I believe there were several that were level of service D. At times of day also.
I have the summary of findings pulled up. It
Great. Yeah,
I can't sure you have to share with me. Unless you log into Zoom and you could share your screen.
could do that.
Do not join with audio. Do that. Or y'all will all. miss.
while we're waiting, I can read the synopsis to you, but my understanding, my summary of the summary is that I believe the increased traffic that causes those less than desirable situations were actually traffic generated from offsite traffic rather than the increased traffic anticipated from this particular property. I think that's
the whole point of a traffic study, though, is to analyze the traffic as a whole, not just what you generate, but I understand.
correct.
I understand what you mean.
It was getting, it was
You will generate some offside traffic with that cut through.
correct, correct. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if that's okay with it, I was just asking a question.
Getting that.
Working on it.
If you're willing to, Donna, I think we could just read it. If you would be. It's an easier path.
I am into the meeting now, so.
There we go.
Capacity and level of service analysis was performed for existing traffic volumes, lane geometry, and traffic control for the AM, school PM, and PM peak hours for the study intersection of Main Street and Cedar Road, Town View Road. All vehicle movements for the existing traffic conditions at the study intersection of Main Street and Cedar Road, Town View Road currently operates what calculates as LOSC or better for the AM, school PM, and PM peak hours of the existing lane geometry, signal traffic control. The development has proposed approximately 6,101 vehicle trips combined in and out per average weekday are projected to be generated by full build of the site. Of this total, approximately 410 vehicle trips are estimated during the traffic conditions of the AM peak hour. Approximately 441 vehicle trips are estimated during the traffic conditions of the school PM peak hour. Approximately 588 vehicle trips are estimated during the traffic conditions of the PM peak hour. Capacity and LOS analysis was performed for the projected traffic conditions, development of Terra Rose PUD plus 5 years background traffic, volume growth for the AM, school PM, and PM peak hours for the study intersections. All vehicle movements for the projected 5-year traffic conditions at the study intersections are expected to operate at what calculates as LOSC or better for the AM and school PM peak hours. Additionally, all vehicle movements for the projected 5-year traffic conditions, the study intersections, are expected to operate at what calculates as LOSD or better for the PM peak hour, except the following. The eastbound through right turn vehicle movements on Seaver Road at Main during the peak hour E. This is only expected to occur for a short time during the PM peak hour, with other hours expected to operate at C during the AM peak hour and B, during the PM peak hour. The southbound vehicle movements on Rose Street at SEBA during the PM peak hour, E. However, the projected 95% percentile Q length for this approach is only 69 feet during the PM peak hour. Additionally, that delay occurs on the site and does not impede the traffic flow on the adjacent SEBA road. Quick summary of that, just saying that those back up onto our site and doesn't actually affect the major traffic. So that E is actually an integral site condition for us to handle. The conclusion of traffic operational findings associated with the study is that the additional traffic expected to be generated by Terra Rose PUD as proposed, plus 5 years background growth, can be accommodated by the existing adjacent roadways and study intersections, lane geometry, and traffic control with the new streets plan to serve the site, with each constructed to accommodate one lane in each direction. Sorry, didn't mean to belabor that. It's a lot longer than I remember.
Any additional questions?
Hopefully.
I think it answers most of the questions. I'm not sure that if I read the summary, and understand it, I'm not sure that they fully took into account any traffic that comes through. But we don't know. We don't know how that changes. I'm not sure that's one that they could predict is the only thing, right? I mean, I think which is one of the questions that you guys asked.
What do you mean the traffic that comes through?
From the neighborhood.
Oh,
Traffic
right.
cut through.
This is simply looking at,
I don't know how you evaluate.
yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
don't, so
You
that's
gotta
the
have a
only thing.
crystal ball to predict. I mean,
What happened?
5-year prediction, and
AM hours.
I thought we're here now 5 years ago.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, but it does take into account, I mean, potentially several thousand vehicles, you know, in regards to the actual PUD.
and that is for full build out too, just to keep in mind,
Yeah.
instead of, we're talking about the daycare center, right?
Yeah.
Currently.
Donna, was the traffic study for the whole site or just the?
Yes, this is
For the whole site.
It says it's a full build out.
Full build out.
Not just the.
Right.
Any additional questions or comments from any of the commissioners?
But this, so phase one is just gonna be Isabel Boulevard, correct?
And a portion of what will look like the Graceway.
Yeah, the north, yeah.
To get there. Just to access the daycare center, right, which is.
Are y'all, Jeff, this might be a question for you. Are y'all curb and guttering, piping everything to the south side of Isabel and then just overland to the pond?
And everything to the pond. And then let's.
I apologize, we don't have all of that.
No additional questions or comments, but I want to make a motion for the development plan for Cassia. Again, understand the approval or denial would be on the development plan, the landscape plan, and the lighting plan.
And the adjacent street agreement. Sorry.
And the additional street agreement.
Joey, I'll make a motion to approve development 2114 Casa Castillo, the large scale plans, landscaping, lighting, and the street agreement.
This Tony, I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is anyone opposed? Thanks, guys. Y'all pour some stuff down on the desk last day or two.
Yeah.
All right, next on the agenda this evening is subdivision 2115 Maple Estates Phase 3. This is the preliminary. I know a couple of you guys didn't sign in. Will you sign in for me before y'all take off? And thank you. Sorry, back to subdivision 2115 Maple Estates Phase 3. This is a preliminary at the northeast intersection of Wolverine Drive and Silver Maple. 56 lots, 15.54 acres. It is zoned R2. Your name and then give us an overview, please.
Sir, for having me tonight. Taylor Lindley with Craft and Toll and Associates. This is the final phase of the Maple Estates subdivision just north of the high school. It's going to be the one actually if I can convert the claim. That mainly 2 streets through there and improvements to Cutbirth and the last extension of Wolverine for our that side. On the east side of Wolverine, water, sewer, pretty standard on this one. Sewer is accounted for by the litigation. Phase 1. That will be available for any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. This is you again as well.
Sure. So this one, as with previous Maple Estates, there was a variance request, variance approved in 2015 for a lot width reduction from 80 feet to 70 feet, with a minimum lot area of 100 square feet. There are modified half street for Wolverine, and then for Cutbirth with right of way dedication just more below. For Cutbirth, there had been a addendum for phase 2, which was approved, shifting improvements to phase 3. With Cutbirth, there will be 40 feet of section line, which would be Williams Park North will give us the full 80 feet collector. For Wolverine Drive, we are at having drainage improvements, half street improvements, and a 2-foot gravel. For right-of-way dedications, there were 30 feet of right-of-way dedicated west of the property with the track split, and there are 40 feet of right-of-way to be dedicated with this property. We would request that the right-of-way developed to the ease access to that. So if possible, we would like to see that, but that is something that we can discuss. And then there are utilities through the Maple Phase 2. Drainage report has been submitted and is recommended for approval. There are street trees adjacent to Wolverine, and remaining comments are pretty minor. So, back to-
Any comments or questions from any of the commissioners?
From the comments I'm seeing, nothing requires to be bondable. They're just typical labeling and.
This is a preliminary,
This is for preliminary. It's pretty.
so nothing there.
We don't see anything substantial that would hold them up.
Okay.
I had a hard time hearing you. What did you say you would like to see, but
So typically, right-of-way is dedicated with final plat. We do, the property to the west is looking at developing, but right now they're short of really, really short distance to get access to the south. And if we had the 30 feet of right of way, we could potentially get up through there. So if we got the right of way dedicated, it would enable that property west to actually come in. That would be a little bit of a kind of unusual request, as right of way is typically flat.
Would it be a separate document then, since it would be?
It could be a separate document.
Have you asked Taylor about it, or?
Have you heard about this?
I've heard about it, yes. There's a lot of backstory and history to it. Some of it I'm not even privy to. The developer has gone back and forth with adjacent property owner, with the city, and different things like that. I think all in all, to Donna's point, and I can kind of point it out, phase 2, I want to say right of way dedicated to somewhere around there, or maybe even past before, I can't remember exactly that plats. But we're talking about, you know, like this much to have no separation they need for fire access for their development. From the latest discussion I recall, Donna, and if I'm wrong, we talked about having a document that dedicated that little amount and then dedicating the rest of it with the final plat. Like I said, the developer's been kind of more involved with the negotiations and conversations in regards to that with the adjacent property owner. He doesn't want to dedicate the whole length of it at this time until we get to final plat.
Feeling good about the section, I'll call.
I think it's in the works, and I believe that would happen for the final plat.
I think we can only ask you. I said, I think we can only ask you to help out.
That's not a requirement.
Right, we'll do our best, and I'll work with the developer and try to get something worked out.
I see one thing y'all might want to look at on the southwest lot. 26-foot easement and 25-foot setback. To adjust that or not. The very southwest corner. It might be a typo on the easement.
We can look at that.
Yeah, I don't think so. You probably don't want the house in the easement.
If there are no other questions or comments, then I would entertain a motion for the preliminary plat approval and adjacent street agreement approval for subdivision 2115 and Maple Estates Phase 3.
This Tony, I make a motion to approve subdivision 2115 Maple Estate Phase 3 preliminary plat and adjacent street agreement.
John, I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is anyone opposed? All right. Thank you, Caleb.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
All right, next on the agenda is subdivision 1906 Featherston Village, Phase 1, final plat. This is the southeast corner of Kimmel and Wilmot. As a reminder, it's zoned R3, single family. It's a PUD 1902, 138 lots, 1 through 138. They are single family. There's 1 detention, 7 unbuildable, 138 buildable, 18.9 acres. And Jeff, you want to give us an overview?
Well, as you said, it's 138 lots on approximately 19 acres. We I'll walk through builds and it's ready to go. Let staff and everything, and we're here to answer any questions you might have. Owners are here as well.
Diane, this is you.
Yes, this is phase 1 of Featherston Village. It's, you guys did approve a PUD for this back in 2019 for the small homes. Actually, it was technically on January 1st, January 7th of 2020 for the PUD 1902 to allow them up to 332. They call them micro homes, you know, like between 600 to 1,000 or so square feet. And they are providing 25% green space for the property. And the covenants have been received and approved by staff and legal. They will have several maintenance bonds that have been approved, and the hard copies are supposed to be delivered by FedEx tomorrow. And those are, and so I can read it also, for just Kimmel and Womack Road, all of their interior streets are private. For 100% for 2 years is $203,000, $203,663. Drainage, 100% for 2 years also is $127,832. And water and sewer, 50% for the 1 year is $284,010. And again, those have all been approved by staff, and we have received PDFs of those that have been approved. So we just are waiting for the final bonds, which should be here tomorrow. And for performance bonds, it is for trails and Womack sidewalk. Not doing the sidewalk all along Womack for phase 1, or that will be with phase 2. So they will be doing all the interior trails, sidewalk. So this would be a performance bond that would travel on to phase 2 of the development. And that is $85,844. And landscaping, again, with the PUD, they did have required landscaping for this development, so that they don't install it and it gets destroyed as homes are being built, and they're still continuing to work on phase 2. They do also have a completion bond of $93,307 from that one. And we also received today a 30-day cash completion bond for some items that were not completed out on the site. There is a parking lot that is to be built on the north side of the retention pond. Oops. All right, don't look at that and try to drive. That has not been constructed. They do have 30 days to construct that parking lot. Let me zoom in here so you guys can see it. It should go in here is where the parking will be, and it was not installed. So they do have 30 days to install that. And there are 30 no parking signs that will need to be installed. That's $2,000, because again, with the PUD, they can only have parking on one side of the street. They cannot be allowed on both sides. Too narrow to get fire apparatus and things like that through there. And also Kimmel Road sidewalk still needs to be completed, and they have a completion bond on that one. Again, has to be done within 30 days of $24,962. They did not request any waivers with the preliminary plat. And for y'all's approval today, contingent on addressing any remaining staff comments as applicable. And they have requested a special city council meeting tomorrow, subject to you all's approval tonight. The site inspection, other than those items that they have requested, and the bond estimate was approved for, everything else on site has been completed. For right of way, they have designated, Kimmel Road is designated as a major collector. And of course, this came in before the new master street plan was, nope, this one actually came in after. So it is 80 feet, and they are going to be dedicating 49 feet from the property line because of where their property line falls in relation to the center line. So that's why they're doing more than the standard 40-foot dedication on Kimmel Road. And Womack, they are dedicating, it is also a 80-foot right-of-way. But this one, they are just doing 30 feet of right-of-way with that one. I don't know why this thing didn't update it when I changed it. And as I stated earlier, all interior streets are private. So they are private access easements, and the property lines go to the center line of the roads. Final plat remaining comments. I just received a brand new one this evening from Jeff when he came in. But for the final plat, those comments are all just minor in nature and just like little cleanup things for the final plat. for drainage, there are remaining comments on the record drawings pertaining to storm drainage inlets and the retention pond modeling. If you have any additional questions on that, you could definitely ask Alan. He's been reviewing this also. So the drainage report is pending approval until the corrected retention pond modeling is received. And for the record drawings, there are still several cleanup items pertaining to the drainage and labeling that need to be corrected on the record drawing before staff will approve the record drawings as complete. Staff does request a $5,000 completion bond for those record drawings. That way we make sure that they do get it back to us. And that's it in a nutshell. And the remaining comments that were still out there, basically, like I said, they do pertain to the as-built or record drawings, and they are included in your packet.
Any comments or questions from any of the commissioners?
I can't see the entirety of the notes because it's so small right now, but I would like to see it listed on the sheet, the note sheet, that say the roads are private, listed in there to make it clear, to clarify on the.
It says it to me.
Yeah, let me zoom in. for
I
you.
can't, like I said, I can't see it was Sarah that I.
It does say it, it's small, but it does say it.
There is blown up for you, Tony.
All streets within the subdivision are private.
There you go.
I'll zoom in a
Man, that
little
makes it
further,
so
too.
easy when you're a city official trying to figure out what streets you're gonna maintain or not. Look at this note.
Yes, and that was a note that
Yeah.
Lance was very adamant to be included on there, and he would really like it in like big bold, but
Very good.
So lots of bonds on this, and I got a couple questions on the bonds. Performance bonds, I guess, pushing stuff to phase 2. Were we expecting these to be completed with phase 1? We were, right?
yes,
Okay.
at least the ones that are in phase 1, obviously not the ones that are in phase 2.
Sure. Is there language in the bond to cover the bond in case phase 2 does not get going for any reason?
There's
Could be an issue. Then the 30-day cash bonds, like the parking lot. I know we asked for that to meet just the sheer number of people here and try to have somewhere for them to park. What's the recourse on the cash bonds if they're not completed? I'm sure I don't know if Lance is here. Lance doesn't want to go in there and build a private parking lot.
They're actually already being installed now.
Okay.
It would be basically the city would cash that check. I mean, as of right now, we just hold it, and if things are done, it just goes back to them. If these things aren't completed within the 30 days,
And we would build the private infrastructure?
their money.
Yeah.
That's proposed.
That's for 20,000. How large is that parking lot?
Said 200.
15 spaces or so.
I just think that's an interesting position to put the city in, but not my call.
The performance bonds are the bigger issue to me. Especially to your point, if phase 2 doesn't get completed. If we have no recourse as a city. Or just talking out loud, if for whatever reason they were not going to complete phase 2, they moved on with the new, whoever comes in wouldn't have access to those bonds, I don't believe. Right, so they would, there's
Those are
no,
made out to us.
yeah, there's no protection for us. Is that correct?
Yeah, a second, Lorraine's got her hand raised. Let me grab her over here.
We're not trying to say anything bad about y'all or what you do. We just gotta look out for our infrastructure and stuff.
If it matters, phase 2 is well under construction. They're getting meters, water and sewer all going in right now.
All right, Lorraine, I think you're unmuted.
Okay. On the bonds, the reason they are made to the city. So if there is work that's not completed, then the city can contract that work by some other developer or by some other contractor to do that work. the reason that there were some that was delayed to phase 2, that's on, okay, like the landscaping, it would have been difficult to put that in and have them come in and build houses and tear up the landscaping and the trails. So we wanted to wait till that's built. The performance bond on the 30-day, those were because the signs weren't in yet. The parking lot was one of those things where it was not shown on the construction plans, but it was shown on a PUD. Well, the contractors did not have the PUD, and it just said parking, but no, it did not show anything being constructed. So we worked that out with them, and they will construct it, but they need some time to do that. And then the Kimmel Road sidewalk, that kind of also goes with building those homes along Kimmel Road, and then they'll put in that sidewalk. But the main thing is, I mean, these bonds, those bonding companies, the bonds are made out to the city, so the city can pull those bonds should the work not be done. Does that make sense?
It does, but it seems like they're tied to phase 2 completion.
So you can only.
Performance bond, yes.
Well, because they'll be
Phase 2 is completed.
in some of the areas that they will complete some of the work. They figured that let's see, this will be, I mean, I imagine on the performance bond, landscaping. Okay, that was the performance bond, but this was, Diane, how long was the phase 1? How long was the landscaping? Because while they were building, they were going to build out, I thought, and then do the landscaping.
Yeah, so that landscaping wouldn't be until everything's built out, but the trails would be once phase 2 is complete.
The landscaping one here says the same thing as the trails and the sidewalk, which is different than what you just said.
Jeff Bates, or is Rob there?
Yes, they're all here.
Yes, Lorraine.
I was just wondering I had understood that they would be working on this while they were working on constructing the buildings, and
This is really just to guarantee that it all gets done. As they build the house, they'll put the tree in front of the house and build the sidewalk. It's like the-
Yes.
So
Yes.
they'll just, as they go,
yes.
I think there's an easy solution here, and it's to put a time frame on it as well.
Now, I was just looking at what was discussed on that time frame.
Typically, I don't know about a time frame you would do a percentage of. Once you've got 25% of the homes built, 50% of the homes built, because we don't know how fast the homes are going to sell. Obviously, they're selling fast right now, but
They were supposed to put these in regardless of the homes being sold.
right.
So just to comment on that, we were instructed by Anthony, we were scheduled to put all the trees and trails in, and Anthony instructed us not to until after the homes were built. But this fear was they would get destroyed.
So you're saying the city told you not to build infrastructure.
Correct.
They didn't want to accept infrastructure that you were willing to build at the time because of the potential damage to the infrastructure.
Typically, that's tied back to the CO on the home, and if they damage something, they fix it before
We
they.
tried to do that, but I think there was Robbie just checked to make sure the tree and bush was there. Issue, that's why we didn't want.
Is there an option to add a time frame for that? I think it would clear up. It could be phase 2 completion or
Because it got,
It's not very-
what happens in phase 1, my understanding so phase 2 is now in the same bond. Them being separated, phase 1 and phase 2. So, phase 2
the build out of it on the houses is probably gonna depend on market.
But you have specific dollar amounts for these specific items that were in phase one. You're saying the bonds aren't made that way?
Well, but being phased, my understanding is the trails and landscape bond is for phase 1 and 2. Instead of just having one for phase 1, somehow phase 2 got tied into phase 1.
I,
So the way that is on the performance bond here, if, like you said, in phase 2, they don't do the sidewalk, we can pull that bond. Same with the trails and the landscaping for these performance bonds. So they can do that as part of phase 2 and so close phase 1 and move those items onto phase 2, so they can do it. It's not tying phase 2 to phase 1.
And I think
All the trees in between now and phase 2 being done.
fine. I think our question was what happens if phase 2 just ceases to exist?
Then we pull these bonds and then contract someone to do it.
So that was my first question I asked, and I was told no. So can we pull the bonds if phase 2 does not?
Yeah, phase 2,
yeah,
But it wouldn't build whatever, like, say, they live right now. The roads aren't done. I'm not saying you will, don't freak out. But say, you know, whatever happens, they pull out now, these bonds won't cover completely building the roads, everything.
And I don't think it's our responsibility as the city to build the private infrastructure to serve that development. That is a separate issue. We're talking about just the public items that we would need to finish that whole project. I'm not worried about their interior private streets or anything about that. I'm worried about the public infrastructure that will be donated with the first phase. That's now being pushed to the second phase. And if we have the ability to cash that bond, if something were to happen, that was my only question. And if the answer is yes, then we're fine.
yes, it's just for the trees on phase 1 and the trails in phase 1 is all as part of this bond. So yes, if they decide not to do that as part of phase 2, or don't get it done with phase 2, or leave before it's completed, then we can pull it just to do the infrastructure
For phase 1
here, which are the trees and trails in phase 1.
That doesn't need a timeline.
Yeah, no, then we're good.
It actually doesn't have a timeline listed on it. So
Right. That's what you
Yeah, the
said.
timeline is completion phase 2.
That went round and round, but I think we can.
So we tried to do it on the front end. And and I mean, if you think about it,
That makes sense. You don't want to run over trees when
think about it, then he did. He had a really great point.
The
The
point
trails
of
and
that
the trees are gonna get destroyed.
was, especially with the trails around, now, the ones around the pond could be constructed. Anthony was talking about the trails that are behind the home. Because those being built right now, they would be completely destroyed when you build a home. But the trails that are on a separate lot, he didn't say any issues about that one being built or trails around the pond.
So the green spaces, we're going to move forward getting the trails and the trees. We want trees and shrubs. So we're gonna be, wherever they can't destroy it with their trucks, we're gonna be finishing it. And as they build the house and landscape it, each house, after they run out of chances to destroy it, they'll be there. So we'll find a chance.
Never underestimate their
Chance,
opportunity
but we'll
to destroy it.
okay. Is there an expiration date on the performance bond? And I think that's what Tony and everyone's getting to. Like, is it 2 years, 3 years?
2 years on,
No, you're taking the maintenance bonds, the performance bond, there was not a deadline.
Okay, I think maybe if we would put an expiration time on it, I think the bonding company would also want that or require that. And then if it doesn't happen, then we can renegotiate if they need more time, or if something happens, then at least after 2-3 years, whatever, then, it can get done. We can pull the bonds, but.
Okay, well, I'm comfortable to make a motion with that statement, and if it turns out from what I was told that we can cash the bond without the timeline, that's great, they have it in place. If it turns out they need the timeline, then we should probably look into that.
Okay, so what would the timeline be? What would the commission request that the timeline be that the bonds expire?
I mean, if we put a timeline on it, then we have to remember to come back and look at it. And I don't know.
Oh, we will. We have a list of the bonds and their expiration dates, so when they go
Oh,
to get
Lorraine.
close to expiration, yes.
Lorraine, let me ask you a question, because I just asked this question again, and I was told, yes, we can cash it without the completion of phase 2. So now I've gotten two different.
Yes, you
answers.
can. Well, you can, but you need to put an expiration date also. That you would need, because you,
We need a triggering mechanism.
Exactly, that's what I was asking, yeah.
that's what I'm saying. You need an expiration term date.
3 years, is that good? Great, 3 years. Perfect.
Yeah, if we're not done in 3 years, we're in trouble.
Don't worry, we'll cash the bonds and do the public stuff.
Cash them and go.
So just, I get what Anthony told you, and this is more for ourselves than it is for you guys, okay? Well, what I would say is if there truly is an agreement, I'll call it, with Anthony or anybody else from the Public Works that says this is the reason something shouldn't be done, we should have that documentation. We don't have that this evening.
Yeah, it needs to be in writing,
And
definitely.
shame on us, because I'm taking their word, we're all taking their word that that's truly what Anthony said. And there's nobody here that can vouch for that. So that's a problem in my eyes, especially on something this big, that's now created all of this question about what we can do and not do. So I would just say that we should make sure that our house is in order for something like that. And if there's a way that we can go back and capture that documentation, I would certainly like to have it as a follow-up to the next meeting. Because in my mind, it's a big deal that's kind of sticks out in regards to this PUD.
If that was just a comment that Anthony made while out there on the site. And there was nothing writing, and it was for the trails behind the lots, not.
Again.
I would like to look at this as we did on Quail Hollow on completion of the adjacent roads. And we've done this before where we accept a performance bond to be completed with the next phase, but it still has an expiration date. I don't know of a bond that doesn't have an expiration date. So
I think we're gonna do that. I do think we're gonna do 3 years, what we're gonna suggest. At least that's what I heard. I'm more concerned about how we got here and making sure that we're documented on why. And I understand it may have been a conversation out there, but there should still be, I mean, when decisions like that are made, those are things that we should be aware of. Well,
I know we learned, we're learning through this. Anytime, it's one thing if you're doing a commercial, you just finish it all and you're done. But on houses, where we are today, the next phase we do this, we'll make sure that the landscape part is better spelled out, how it's gonna be handled. At the time, I never thought about the problem that would create the expectations to have it all in place and flat, then building houses behind it and big trees and being in the.
I don't think we disagree with the trees, they're gonna get blown out of there if they put it in y'all. I mean,
And then the trails behind the houses
Washed out.
with utilities, that part that will go in, and just like a sidewalk in the front, that trail will go in at the time that the house is being built. And then it will be completed as it goes down, so.
but I think Joey made the point earlier. I mean, we're also trying to protect ourselves because if for whatever reason, the 9 of us are not here,
Yes.
4 guys are not here, and the staff isn't here in a year, then somebody may ask questions. And they're gonna have to go back and listen to this and try to decipher and understand the documentation. So that's the reason that we're trying to do.
When we do, we're working on the next 40, we're gonna have this better spelled out.
And I know the PUD creates some uniqueness in itself as well. Mayor Bill, did you have a?
Yeah, I'm in touch with Anthony. He's gonna zoom in just a minute.
Okay,
If you want to hear from him. So give him just a minute. I just sent him the link.
thank you.
Then you get your questions answered.
All right. He's gonna call, I mean, we'll give him.
Finally, you're good with review.
3 years seems like a long time to me, but I mean, that's, I would defer to you guys. I just want a triggering mechanism in there. So long as we've got something, I'm okay.
Bear with us for just a second.
Can you guys hear me?
Here, Anthony.
Sure. Hey, Anthony, thanks for joining
Hey, how are
us.
What can I do to help?
So there was a discussion this evening. We're talking about the Featherston Village Phase 1. They're trying to get their final plat this evening, and there was a discussion around trails and sidewalk and landscaping, in which I guess there was some instruction from you to the developer in regards to waiting on those due to the fact they could be torn up and some other things. And so we just wanted to make sure if you remember that conversation, or we're just trying to cover all of our bases. Do you remember that conversation?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay.
Anthony, was that for just, I know we had this conversation out there, obviously the ones behind the houses, but this was for all of them.
Yes, the discussion I had with the developers out on site were the ones behind them and not the common areas. The common areas were discussed in the final inspection, which I had never discussed with the developer. We had talked about ones that ran along the backside, and those would be tore up by equipment and home building because they're not concrete. They're all just gravel.
And at the end of the day, those are the only public ones that we're talking about. The interior sidewalks are not public.
There was some interior ones that ran along this roads that went north and south that wouldn't be technically impacted by the home construction that we felt.
They're not private trails because they are part of the green space that is required. I mean, the developer will be the one to maintain them and take care of them once they're installed, but they are available for all public use.
Correct. But my personal opinion, I don't feel that any of the trails in this situation need to be constructed at this stage, just because they're all gravel and they're going to be tracked over, contaminated, and they're not going to look very good when they're done. And that was what the discussion was with the developer. It's just not a smart idea to do it now, in my opinion.
Questions or?
Hey, Anthony, this is Joey. I just wanted to let you know, we got you on here because this kind of creates a sticky situation for us when we weren't expecting this. So in the future, could you just document that and make sure we're all on the same page before we do that?
Yes, there's going to be some changes based on this subdivision alone that happened between discussions between us, Tripp and Bates. I mean, it was understood by what discussion with Tripp. And so we went from there.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you joining us, Anthony. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions or comments from any of the commissioners? If there are not, then I would entertain a motion for subdivision 1906 to Featherston Village, Phase 1, final plat, the covenants and the bonds as we discussed this evening.
John, I'll motion to approve subdivision 1906 Featherstone Village Phase 1, final plot, the applicable bonds with the amendment of a 3-year expiration on the performance.
Joey, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is anyone opposed?
Including the $5,000 bond for the record drawings.
Yes, it said all applicable bonds with the, the 3-year amendment.
Thank you, guys. Good luck. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, for getting Anthony on there for us.
Speaking of trees.
All right, next on the agenda is under other business is development 2102, the trail storage parking requirements. This is at 780 Buckhorn Flats. It is zone C2, 9.43 acres. How did I feel? I'm all right. You want to give us an overview?
Sure, we're looking at this, it's not Buckhorn Flats, just south of Kimmel Road. West side. Some flex space here. So we've laid out buildings and parking, tried working with staff on just what the parking requirements. There's not really a category in parking requirements for what we're trying to do. We'll have a variety of tenants in this facility. But in general, what we're looking at is your typical plumber that might have a 200 square foot office and a place to park their vehicle and store some supplies, or a landscape contractor, cabinet guy, a variety of different uses there. So there's not a particular category we can apply to parking requirements. So what we've done, if you look at down here in the red box, we've called for 75% of the space to be declared in a warehouse require for parking, and 25% as a mix of what your office and retail would be calculated at. So when you add that up, we have a requirement of 258 spaces. But what we're hoping to do is get your nod that you're good with the way we're calculating parking here, since there's not really I mean, we've been told we can ask for a variance, and we would if there was a baseline, but we don't have a baseline. So we're looking for your nod that we we're considering the space would be appropriate for 75% warehouse and 25% office and retail. We'd also like to, we plan on bringing the large scale through for you to approve, but we'd also, something we would ask at that time is that we be allowed to track all the parking stalls at the CVO of each building.
Is that the loading zone?
Well, yeah, what we show now, I mean, we may end up with just parking stalls all the way across every building, depending on kind of the tenants that are coming in and that kind of thing. But right now what we show, if you look at a typical 40 by 100, those two existing ones there in the southeast corner, you know, we show 6 or 7 spaces in front of those. And so we use that same model mostly everywhere else, where there's 6 or 7 for every 100-foot run of building. And we've allowed for some loading zones. There'll be some garage bay doors here. But really, even where the garage bay doors are, people will be parking in front of those bay doors, you know. So it's kind of a unique situation. It's going to require some flexibility in the way the parking requirements are interpreted. But what we did is we looked at a couple other facilities. There's one over by the spare box storage. I think the Bernetti's have there right on 72. Calculated their parking, and we've got well more per square foot than what they show. We looked at another one on Highway 102, called Eagle Crest, I believe, or Eagle Industrial Park. And we've got more than what they've shown as well, but this facility is at least twice as big as either of those. So you'll have some economy by scale as well, that I think this amount of parking is going to be more than enough. We feel very comfortable.
Where'd you come up with the 75-25?
Yeah, that's really the discussion. It's, I mean, yes, I don't know. I mean, what we ran that number, and then we tried to see how many parking stalls did that come up with, and base that on what other developments that we've seen like this have. And this comes up with even more than what any of those have ever. Going over to the Bernetti's there on 72.
Talking about the offices in front of the storage units?
No,
Behind there.
The unit
beside it,
Okay.
yeah, beside the
where
school.
there's some warehouse stuff, right?
I can add
Yeah,
some input
that's right.
here, Fresh Craft Electrical, so I'm involved in that as well, but I will tell you, I did a little bit of market research and kind of tried to pre-lease just to get an interest. You know, when we leased the buildings that are existing, we had zero interest from a retail or office type person. It was absolutely your electrician who wants, you know, to use it as his shop. We had cabinet
group interested. We have some existing tenants that want to expand, to 4,000, 6,000 feet. So I don't think that, we're going to be renting them out at 1,000 increments, and have a lot of retailers out there off of 780 next to the concrete plant. But we did want to allow for that in the event that some of those folks manufactured something or something that they would create a retail for themselves. And we didn't want to restrict them.
Well, that's my question. Is where is this located?
On Buckhorn Flats, if you go south from Kimmel, and it's just
Next
past
to
the
the
concrete
batch
plant.
Concrete plant? Okay.
Just south of it.
So let me throw some out. Let's go back to the overview then, if we're gonna throw that out there and, no, I'm sorry, sorry, you were where I wanted to be, but just look at it overall. I mean, so if I look at it in that way, then it is gonna be more, I'll call it a heavier commercial, not quite industrial. It doesn't seem very friendly for that. The one that you reference over here on 72, it's wide open, right? I mean, you pull in there and you've got wide open space. Here, if I'm trying to navigate a larger truck, a mid-sized truck, a trailer and everything else, it becomes difficult in my mind to navigate some of that. So in that case, I wonder if there's a way to have, I'll call it flexible parking for lack of better word. And I don't know what that really means, but maybe, and I don't know the orientation, at the top of the screen, I'll call it, instead of being striped for parking, should that be more flex? Or, maybe even in the middle, and then we kind of take that away from a parking requirement? I'm just talking out loud.
Are you saying instead of like each individual building kind of set up areas?
Maybe there's areas, I don't know, I'm just kind of throwing ideas out, rather than dictate an X amount of parking. I get we have to give them some guidance, but I like some of the parking around the buildings, but maybe it's some of the, I'll call it the navigable areas where it would be difficult, and I know it's not to scale and we're not there, but I mean, if somebody wants to bring a 53-foot truck in there, they're gonna have problems right now. If I just look at it on the big picture, right? Maybe getting around and some other things.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Is there a flex space that would be a hard surface that could be, all of a sudden you get an office and you need 100 parking spots. Well, now you can go stripe something versus today there's more commercial potential, I'll call it. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as a potential in the future instead of a requirement.
So a couple of clarifying questions for you, if you don't mind. One, we did have to design it for a truck turnaround for the fire, right? So the lanes should all be, that's the loop,
Outer loop.
right?
That's
So
the
that
outer.
will be your truck route as well,
Okay.
designated and paved accordingly for truck routing. So you would instruct your truck traffic, because one, you don't want it to impede your existing parking as well and interfere with.
Corner looks tough.
But second, I think you're exactly right. We said, hey, we want to build this out in phases. First of all, we're not going to go throw 100,000 square feet up and wait for it to rent, obviously. But when we build the first phase out, again, we'll see what the interest is, to your point, see what kind of people we have coming in and driving the traffic. And that's kind of why we ask, can we stripe as we go, as these folks get C of O, to see what their business requirements are.
You to drive the truck in that
Southwest corner?
I'm just saying, I want you to drive it.
I think I can do it. I think I can absolutely do it.
So if we go back to phasing then,
Uh-huh.
especially based on the last conversation that we just had, is your vision that there would be this circle all the way around, and then
Yes.
I'll call it the main street, and then you would build the others.
Yes, as needed, because obviously we have to construct the fire lane and make sure that there's the horseshoe and the fire turnaround in the existing. So as we go in and do sewer and water and all of that, we would build out the lane that you're speaking of. And then our phase one ideally would just be this extension of this long side that you see to complete the two existing buildings that are there and build that out first, along with all the infrastructure that goes to the site.
If you plan on doing phases, we'll want to definitely see that as we know it's,
And that,
work in progress.
well, and that
right?
kind of creates a get it permitted all with one large scale and you come back and decide you want to change it. That's different than designing the first phase, showing stuff grayed out. Maybe that second phase changes, but that would require different plans. you know what I'm saying?
Because it also impacts the drainage and everything else, right?
Yeah, and I guess, in general, I think what we're hoping here is that, I know y'all are enforcing the code, but we're hoping market dictates what's needed here. I mean, people aren't gonna, if they were, if we do this in phase, I like the idea of phases, but if somebody comes in here and sees the first phase built and they go, man, there ain't parking for anything, I'm not gonna go right there. We're hoping that that pressure that they feel is what really dictates what parking is gonna be needed. I don't know, I would love to still be able to do it all as one large scale, but phase it into smaller pieces, and then that way, if they see that this isn't working or they can't rent to who they want to, then we say, we gotta regroup.
Just off the cuff, I'm speaking for myself. This looks like a lot of parking.
Yeah, well, and we've cut.
It looks like a lot more than Bill would expect.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to cut
The
building
north, yeah,
types
the
to
north,
get to
buil-
this.
the north middle building, we cut back because we tried to make sure we could meet, see, we also feel like there's a lot of green space. The interior 8% green space was a challenge to make work as
Well, I
well.
asked for how'd you get the 75% calculation, because that's,
Yeah. Well, and we created all these extra, green islands just to meet the, which just, normally you would see in a commercial part, not more in an industrial type deal, but.
Now, I will say you're very adjacent to single family too. I think it's gonna be important on your frontage and maybe that south side to have enough room to plant trees, screening and stuff like that. So I see there's a water line in there. I don't know. I see some valves. I don't know where it goes, but
Yeah.
I think there's a power line there too, it looks like maybe.
Oh, it's floodplain on the southeast corner.
It's what, sorry?
Floodplain. Wetlands delineation on that back.
Stairs on the northeast side.
I see some power poles. I don't know if they run north. I don't, anyways. I'd keep that in mind because I think that's gonna be a big deal.
We want to meet the neighbor, make no mistake, agree. And one, we want them to look like a place you want to rent, we don't want it to be, and not to insult Kubernetes, but we don't want it to be something that appears like people are collecting their junk outside and they have stuff that, when you drive home, your new home you just built, you have to look across the street at that. That's not the vision here. This is something where these folks can be proud of their business and the neighbors don't have to worry about it either.
Are these basically gonna be left open inside and build the suit?
Build out.
Yeah, so somebody might rent out, if there are 25-foot spaces, let's say that people may say, I want 8 of them, or I want the whole building.
I want the whole building.
Yeah, or somebody might want one for a little office.
Do you think the one dumpster pad's enough?
We got 2, I don't know if you see the.
I see the other one. You think that's enough?
Well, I don't know. I think the
Depends
same.
on the use.
Right, and
I'm just there.
I think this phasing is gonna help us if, if it looks like the market's just calling for something different.
And it might seem like I'm not hitting on parking, but all this stuff affects your parking. But I think you have room to add extra dumpsters. Just again, off the cuff, it looks like, I would feel comfortable with the parking.
I'm not gonna lie, this was a lot of parking. This was a bit painful, you do go square feet of buildings.
And at the end of the day, if you don't have enough parking, that really only hurts yourself.
Correct. And so, just based on the folks that have entertained moving out here, I think we have more than adequate.
So I think I'm hearing, we'll do a really good job of landscaping the frontage, so that it's screened that way. We'll also probably call for some smaller phasing so that this can be evaluated as we go rather than a big chunk at a time. And otherwise, I think I'm hearing that y'all like the amount of parking, are those good takeaways?
You heard me say that. I don't know if you heard anybody else.
I think that was.
Joey was gonna count the trees, but they're not in there yet.
Oh, here we go.
But I do think that I think from my perspective, the ratio is a good ratio to use. I think in an environment like this, I think we need to have a little bit of that flexibility and also rely on you guys to come back as you're doing the phasing to give us, hey, here's what we actually have. We also need to understand if that building goes away in 5 years, we need to think about that. So it's not just a short-term tenant, it's also a midterm and a long-term. So we also think about that, which is the reason I think we have some of these ratios that we use. So, I think overall it's good. I'm certainly open up to any other commissioners that have any comments or questions about it.
What's your temperature on us striping at the C of O? guess that what I'm concerned about is we get to the end of a build out of a phase and then we want to build it out and there's a walkthrough and they're like, hey, did you build the parking that you promised? Well, we wouldn't in that case because it's going to kind of depend on that tenant.
You could stripe them by phase, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So, I mean, we'll pre-lease it.
Okay. So maybe that, I mean, it sounds like a lot
Well,
of
you
this.
use the building before. According.
Yeah. So it sounds like,
They changed though. What are y'all gonna do then?
yeah, I mean, I think they're just gonna have, it's gonna have to be something that happens on the owner side that they lease to someone similar or for similar or less parking requirements than what.
Turn people away.
I mean, our ideal tenant, just to be honest with you, just for managing the property today, is not an office and retail tenant. It's the industrial guy that's either building, constructing, et cetera, and they are willing to sign longer term leases with rent concessions and different things. And that's more the model we would simply manage versus turning fast, and you're renting them every year. That's not the model here, like, multifamily housing or anything like that. That's not what we would be in.
So on the north and south run of that east-west parking, is there a feasible location to break that up with a couple islands or something?
Tell me again what you're talking.
So the bottom run and the top run, I'm just thinking, as you go by and you look, that's just gonna be one expanse of asphalt. I didn't know if there's logical places maybe between the two, all those buildings down there, but then the top doesn't have any.
Joey, don't we have land in our code that you can only have a run of so many?
That's a great comment, Tony. We have it worked up, but it's never been adopted. That's true.
It's because there'll be fire sprinkled, and so
Yeah.
we're gonna continue to so we can fire
I
sprinkle.
think we could do some islands in there.
I mean, just a couple to break it up.
And then whatever we lose in parking, we may pick up elsewhere.
You have,
Or can we-
you have zero,
You got the stripe space that could.
It could just be that anyway.
because you also have zero loading docks on the,
Right.
right?
That's right.
Are you expecting the deliveries, that delivery truck is to follow that outdoor or that outside route and then
Yeah,
just get off and deliver?
yeah.
I love y'all. I don't think it's an issue for anything with the two middle buildings, right? Or if that western building faces inside.
Right.
But that, again, that's a matter.
Trade those little corner islands for something else to satisfy greens. Much better for doing this around look like all the time.
I think we could work with you on that southwestern one. It would help fire as well to get through there.
The southwestern.
That one that we said's tight.
No, the other side.
Making the corner for the truck, yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
That one, like, and this is vacant space today that we could also do something with. These buildings don't join together.
Hmm.
So we could turn that into some green space.
Oh, I was saying you might be able, I think it makes sense logically, that one on the corner right there, to maybe not have that green space, so your curb doesn't get busted up.
Maybe where those are, where somebody's gonna navigate it.
Goes to one of the runs or
I
something.
can make that turn, but
Yeah. It sounds like the parking
Maybe your
requirement.
personal vehicle.
Honda.
So the parking requirements and whether we can stripe perfect, it sounds like phasing is the big answer to a lot of these concerns to me.
Yeah. I would hate to, here's my fear on striping with the phasing, is what happens to the leftover space? If it's not needed, and, we've approved something that's under the parking requirement right now, even though we've discussed it, but if that gets even smaller, there's the potential for that to reduce just based on the use.
Yeah. And all I'm saying is whenever you approve this, when we can come through full large scale and then we can talk about how we've phased each piece and you can see how, then we can go, hey.
It'll be striped per your plan. You just wanted the ability, I don't think that's.
Stripe it when the tenant goes through CBO.
And just make sure I don't understand this wrong. I don't think we're actually changing anything per code. I mean, unless you would say that the code is 1 per 300 square feet as office space.
Yeah, it would have to be an interpretation of the code.
I didn't know what the code, there's not really a code that addresses this type of space.
That's where typically you just do it to the most restrictive use. So in this case, it'd be the one space for every 250 square feet. whereas warehouse is 1/500. You try to double the amount of parking here, and already we're looking at, it's very high, and that's where that, knowing the tenant comes in. Making that assumption, where having those comparisons, knowing that there's more parking at comparable areas. I know they looked at the two, and then also kind of estimating what the uses are. By doing it in phases like you're looking at, you're able to say, all right, it seems like we're having more commercial space. So by the time you finish phase 1, 2, and 3, then we might be able to make more space. And that's where he's saying stripe per phase. Because you look at the is that north on the top, there's a lot of that loading area that if we take some of those away, we have to add ADA, yes, but you can gain another dozen spaces or so. Would that be enough to cover an eye requirement for more commercial?
Just to be clear, when I said striping by phase, my expectation would be that it's on your large scale and you factored into that your leasees, that the striping is per the large scale. But you can, you can leave the grayed out areas for phase 3, but you can figure out that parking when you do that design. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we'll just need to, everything kind of needs to get micro into each phase, and so we'll do that out at phase by phase. Okay.
We just want to make sure we have everything tight so that we come back, right, we're satisfied because we're trying to get off there too.
Okay. I think that
That's
helps.
clear.
Yeah, I get that. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your.
Thank you.
And Joey, I think I heard you say we get rid of that corner.
I said I would be supportive of that just for fire truck access. It's gonna get beat up.
It's just gonna be broken off of this guys.
Yeah.
Right, they're just gonna drive right over it.
It's in the back, so it's a little, it's a little
We
better.
are like right on the dot with the 8% interior, right? Like we are.
We talked about adding others too.
So what we can do, I mean, we'll probably have to use up the bigger parking spaces there. So we can widen that whole. We'll just
You
add
should have 28.
So could you flare, I don't know if your pond takes up that whole area, could you flare that out to make that turn wider and then taper it back in up by the
I
plant?
think this is drawn to scale. I
Yeah,
think.
within the floodplain where you can kind of bump that out a little
We'll
bit.
lose 1 or 2 spaces here and here, and that way this radius can.
Should
Could
already-
you adjust the western curb to get that?
Yeah.
On the other side of the road?
Yeah, both.
Flare it out and then come back?
Like a little bubble.
Like a little knuckle on a
Yeah.
cul-de-sac.
The problem is this is flooded away, so I can get through.
Can't go very far.
I gotcha. I thought that was floodplain.
I think we can still pull that radius way back, so I think we can actually pull all this back, which would be good for that too. We'll just, whatever we lose there, we can add back.
Yeah, if we smooth it out, it's not as tight of a radius.
It'd be better for y'all and fire.
Yes.
Well, your feedback's very helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
You guys, good luck. The next tech review meeting is 3/24. Our next planning commission meeting is 4/5. Just as a reminder, if you can't be here, just let us know. Other than the special council meeting tomorrow night, there is one for 12. Anything else from staff? Anything else from the commissioners? If not, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. So moved. Motion and a second. Is anyone opposed? Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Switching.
It's late.
Hear what Tony said. I said, go ahead.